welcome back everybody to this shipper update. I'm Zach Strickland here with Anthony Smith. And Anthony, it's Thursday. Let's hear it.
That's right, Zach. Thursday, so that means one thing and one thing only. That means initial jobless claims, and we saw some downward movement here. So is that good news? Now below the 250,000 mark, which is great. 232,000 applicants for initial jobless claims this most recent week. Sorry for those 232,000 because those are individuals that need some assistance and help and might be going through some hardships, but we want to see it in that low area as opposed to anything over 300,000. And so that's definitely where we want to be in the sweet spot there. So definitely good news there. Have this chart here so we can see this downward movement that's been consistent over the last few months. Thankfully, we saw, of course, some variations, some fluctuations. This is always going to be a little bit volatile because it is, of course, a weekly index, but if you look at something on a weekly index, you have to kind of smooth it out, look at the actual growth rate, look at the trend, and it has been trending down, so this is good news overall. Of course, in our next chart here, Zach, one that doesn't get some of the same attention, and that's going to be continued claims, which is going to be ongoing applicants that are staying on those initial claims. This isn't their first time claiming, it's their consecutive time claiming, and so they're remaining unemployed. And as we can see, this has also been moving down as well. The most recent release saw that there were 112,000 fewer applicants for continued claims, so showing that the overall trend is continuing to come down. This is going to be 2 weeks lagged behind the weekly initial jobs claims, but this is still showing the overall trend, and this over here is good news for those consumers.
Yeah, it looks like everybody is still for the most part, gainfully employed. The weekly jobless number, now your benchmark is right around 275, is that right?
So if it gets to 275, I see, okay, yellow light, 300,000, I'm like, hey, what's going on here? Eyebrows raised, but if it stays under that 250 mark, just fine.
I like your little DEFCON warning there. The continued claims is interesting because, good grief. But that's 1.5 million people, right?
Right, yeah, and so that's definitely still a large amount of individuals, but definitely something that we are happy to see that it's come down from the 4 million, 3 million mark. So definitely a huge decline here, but we definitely want to see this still stay kind of elevated.
What's this one historically speaking, like before pandemic? What are we talking about?
So before pandemic, I wouldn't be too shocked if I saw this around, let's say 1.3, 1.4. So I think this is okay at decent levels. The job market is great for a lot of individuals. So this is one of those areas where, Zach, I said it yesterday, I'll say it again today. This is one of those things where it gets into consumer sentiment. Is like, I still see it being meaningful, but I also have to look at the actions, and right now the actions are saying, hey, there's that job market right now. We have quit rates still very much elevated. And of course, in our next chart here, we got to dive into some of the trends in retail sales because this is meaningful as well. So looking in the blue line here, we have retail sales for the overall non-store USA. So a little bit of e-commerce worked in there. And in the green line, of course, here we have volumes. And so looking at some of those, we see that the correlation is pretty strong here. When we see an increase in non-store retailers, we also see an increase in volumes, other goods being shipped throughout the country. But Zach, the thing is, we've been talking about it so much, is that we can't get too caught up in the month-to-month number. It is important, but what's the trend? And we've been talking about this, of course, on things like Freightonomics. If you're got time around noon on Thursdays, Eastern Standard Time, check it out. A little shameless plug there. But we've been talking about the slower growth pattern and what it means for U.S. consumers and what it means for really data overall. And that we can still see month-to-month increases and still be in a slower growth pattern. So in our next chart here, we're going to look at what's going on. Of course, so okay, we have retail sales for motor vehicles and parts. This is up pretty substantially, but it's starting to kind of moderate a little bit on a year-over-year basis. But we're still seeing some upward movement here for overall retail sales for motor vehicles and parts. This is going to be a big ticket item that's going to take some confidence to purchase, and so this is going to have some ties into that as well. Moving into our next chart here, that was a monthly indicator. This is going to be a different indicator for non-store retailers for year-over-year change. If you look at this, this is month to month. If you look at this, it's showing some pretty substantial rise. And you can see that, okay, there's some strong momentum. There's a lot of growth here. But if you go to our next chart here, we're going to look at retail sales for non-store retailers. Almost looks like a completely different trend. We see this, of course, upward movement on year-over-year basis throughout the pandemic. Of course, 2019 to 2020 is going to have a lot of drastic changes. But when you start to see what's going on here, it's slower growth. That slower growth is expected, and it's not indicative of weakening just yet. It's just, hey, there's still growth, double digits in some areas, but it's just growing at a slower pace right now.
Yeah, those comps get a little bit tighter, especially coming out of some of this record growth months of last year.
Especially when they were fused with stimulus package money and things like that. So definitely something to take into account when you look at the data, look at the year-over-year trends.
Exactly. Good stuff, Anthony Smith. Well, we'll toss it over to Mike, who I believe has a special guest, Thomas Wasson.